I've already started it. Hello and welcome to Serendipity, the Summit Public Libraries program. Today we have an exciting program about races and games. The Cherokee story is the first one, so let's get started. At one time, many years ago, human beings and animals and birds could all talk the same language. It was such a magical time. And more than that, the animals and the birds had many conversations, many good games and good times together. But occasionally the birds and the animals would argue. Occasionally they would even start to fight, and sometimes they would even hurt one another. One day, the birds argued with the animals, and the birds said that they were number one. They were stronger, they were better, they were smarter, they were better looking. They argued back and forth until it almost broke into a war. So the animals and the birds decided that they would do what the Cherokee men did. They would settle this by playing a game of stickball, and they set up the game. At that time, so long ago, the four-legged, the animals, had one of the toughest ball teams in the land. Mountain lion, wolf, fox, bobcat, and deer were all members of the team. The captain of the team was Bear, and Bear was very boastful. "No team in the land can beat us," Bear would often say. Well, the birds also had a very fine team. Their captain was Eagle. The other winged creatures included hawk, falcon, raven, crow, buzzard, owl, and blue jay. The night before the game was to be played, each team had a traditional dance. At the animals' dance, two little creatures asked Bear if they could join his team. Bear laughed at them. He said, "Go away. We have no time for small, weak creatures like you." The two small creatures walked away with their heads hung low. But they didn't give up. They went to the birds' dance and asked Eagle if they could join his team. Eagle said, "Yes, anyone who wants to play and has wings is welcome to join us." "But we don't have wings," said the small creatures. "We can help with that," said Eagle. He took the leather from the top of an old drum, cut out wings, and attached them to one of the little creatures. That little one, who is now called Bat, flew around and said thank you. He was so happy with his new wings. But there was no more leather left for the other small creature. So Eagle got Hawk and Raven to pull hard on the sides of the second one and stretch his sides out as far as they could go. That little creature became known as the flying squirrel, and he loved gliding from tree to tree. Now, both teams were ready. Animals and birds came from miles around to watch the game. They were really excited. This was going to be the battle to end all the arguments about who was going to be number one forever. As soon as the game started, Bear grabbed the ball and ran down the field to make the first goal. "I told you this would be easy," he said. Then Hawk got the ball and threw it to Eagle, who soared past Wolf to score the first goal for the birds. And that is the way the game went all day long. The birds scored, and then the animals scored, then the birds would score, then the animals would score, and finally the game was tied up 11-11. Whoever would score the next point would win the game, because the games ended at 12. Now the birds got the ball and they were streaking toward the goal, but they dropped it. Oh no. The animals got the ball, and they threw it from one to another, and they finally threw it to their secret weapon, Mr. Skunk. Mr. Skunk put that ball in his mouth, and he started waddling down the field. And everybody backed off. Nobody wanted to try to get the ball from Mr. Skunk. "Come on, go for it, get the ball. He's gonna score," screamed all the birds. Finally, Mr. Buzzard, brave Mr. Buzzard, swooped down. He grabbed the skunk so hard, he ripped a white streak right down his back, and the skunk still has that white streak today. Well, the skunk sprayed that buzzard. Ooh, he sprayed that buzzard so bad. And the buzzard smelled so terrible that to this very day, he has to fly all by himself because no one wants to fly next to someone who smells so bad. Finally, Mr. Blue Jay said, "I think the owl could do it. He's wise." And so the owl said, "Yes, I can. And he swooped down to get the ball, but the skunk sprayed him right in the face. And the owl was sprayed so bad he got big rings around his eyes, and he still has those today. Then the buzzard said, "Well, I'll just do it myself." He swooped down all around the skunk's head to distract him, and when he did, the flying squirrel glided out of the trees, grabbed the ball, and passed it to Bat. They scored the winning point. The birds were so happy, everybody cheered. Mr. Blue Jay took all the credit. He said he was the one, and he was the one that won the game, and he put a big sign hanging around on all the trees that said the birds are number one. But you and I know who really scored the winning point. And to this day, as evening draws to a close, you may still see Bat darting this way and that through the night, or a flying squirrel gliding from tree to tree, still rejoicing in their gifts of flight and always ready to play another game. And that is the story of the birds and the animals stickball race. Now, stickball was something like our lacrosse game today. The Native Americans played lots of sports, and some of them were similar to our baseball, basketball, and football. Now, I really enjoyed that exciting Cherokee story. In our nonfiction section at the library, we have books that tell true facts, of course, about Indians. The two stories that I'm telling you about the races, they are found in the 398.2 section. Now, the Cherokee, this is a picture of Sequoia, who was the person who wrote down the Cherokee alphabet, which helped the people very much with their education. You can see this beautiful picture of where most of the Cherokee lived when the Europeans first came over. They lived in the beautiful Appalachian Mountains in several states, North Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia. The Cherokee lived in small towns. Each town had two chiefs. One chief ruled during peace, and the other chief ruled during war. Members of the Cherokee family built their homes near each other. Many families had two homes. Their summer house might have windows to catch the breeze. The dome-shaped winter house had thick walls made out of clay, and that house kept them warm through the cold winter. The Cherokee grew crops. They grew corn, peas, and beans. The women also gathered wild plants. They made clothing. They wove baskets. Cherokee women still weave baskets out of river cane, white oak, and honeysuckle. And you can see that their baskets are very beautiful works of art. The men were the hunters. They hunted bison, deer, and turkeys. They fought in wars. They used arrows, clubs, and axes. Hunting with the bow and arrow made it possible to bring down larger game. And that was what the people had to eat. They didn't have grocery stores where they could go and buy their meat or their poultry. They had to hunt it. Now, the Cherokees believed in the Great Spirit, and they believed the Great Spirit created the world. They had many ceremonies, and the ceremonies always included dancing. This is a picture of a powwow that was held in North Carolina. I would love to go to one of these. Today, many Cherokee also live in Oklahoma. Some speak the Cherokee language. Some wear Cherokee clothing. They dance in ceremonies. They keep their traditions alive. 2 of 3 Cherokee tribes today live in Oklahoma. The other one lives in North Carolina in the mountains. I'm from North Carolina, and I know that there is a town in the mountains that's called Cherokee. The Cherokee told stories to explain the world around them. In one story, 2 little creatures wanted to play a game with the birds. We just heard that story, didn't we? But they couldn't fly, so Eagle made them wings. And they became Flying Squirrel and Bat. So many of the Native American stories explain how Bat got his wings, how Flying Squirrel was made like that, how turtle shell was cracked. It's fun to read them. They're made-up stories about why different animals look the way they do. Now, we're going to get back to the races in just a minute and have an Abenaki race with Raccoon's last race. But first, I want to share a short Cherokee song with you. We all are one. We are all connected. We are all connected. Deer and fish, dog and flea, bird and butterfly and bee. We are all connected. We are all connected. Boys and girls, young and old, all Earth's creatures live as one. We are all connected. We are all connected. And that's what many of these stories tell us, that we're connected with the earth, with the animals, and certainly with each other. Now, the next story, as we go back to the races, comes from the Abenaki tribe of Native Americans. And this story is called Raccoon's Last Race. The Cherokee lived in the originally in the southeastern part of what is now the United States, and the Abenaki lived in the northeastern part of New England in America, and they lived in Quebec in Canada, and still do. They still live in those places. This book that I'm going to share with you now, the story was written by Joseph and James Bruchac. That's a father and son. Pictures by Jose Arriego and Ariane Dewey. Raccoon's Last Race. Long ago, Raccoon did not look the way he looks today. Back then, Asban the raccoon had very long legs and was a fast runner. In fact, he was the fastest of all the animals. Because of this, he liked nothing better than to challenge the other animals to a race. With his long legs, he would always win. He would race Bear, Zip, zip, he would beat bear. He would race fox. Zip, zip, he would beat fox. He would race rabbit. Zip, zip, he would beat rabbit. And there he is, beating all of his friends. Asban the raccoon also liked to taunt and tease the other animals. While racing, he would sing, "Hee, hee, hee, look at me. I am Asban, I am fast. Look at you, ho, ho, ho. You are very, very slow." As you might imagine, this did not please the other animals. After a while, none would accept Asban's challenges. In fact, they even refused to speak to him because he was always trying to taunt and tease them into racing again. They didn't even want to talk to him. But this didn't stop him. He began to play tricks on the other animals. He would hide in a tree, and when the other animals walked by, he would jump down and frighten them. Because Asban was so fast, no one could ever catch him. One day, Asban saw someone sitting high on the top of a tall hill. "Perhaps I can play a trick on that one. Perhaps I can challenge him to a race," Asban said. He quickly ran to the top of the hill. But when he got there, he found that it was not an animal at all. It was a big rock. This did not disappoint him. He loved to talk, especially about himself. "Grandfather," he said to the rock, because it was an old rock, "are you a fast runner? I am the fastest of all the animals." To Asban's surprise, the big rock spoke back. In a deep voice he said, "No, grandson, I do not travel. I just sit here." "You should try it, grandfather," said Asban. He smiled. But the rock said, "I do not want to travel. I have been here for a long time, and that is how it will always be." But Asban smiled. "Maybe not, grandfather. I will help you." Then Asban got behind Big Rock and began to push and push. As he did so, the rock began to wobble back and forth. Thump, thump, thump! Asban pushed harder and harder. Kaboom! The rock fell over on its side and began to roll. Kaboom! 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 It rolled down the hill. "Aha, grandfather! Now you are traveling!" shouted Asban. As Big Rock rolled down the hill, Asban quickly caught up and ran alongside. "How do you like it?" he asked. And Big Rock said, "Kaboom, kaboom, kaboom," as he rolled on down the hill. Well, as Asban saw the big rock picking up speed as he went down the hill, getting faster and faster. "Yippee!" thought Asban. "The rock is trying to challenge me to a race. I will show it a thing or two." And Asban ran past the rock, running as fast as he could. Kaboom, kaboom went the rock. "Ha, ha, ha, you are not as fast as I am," said Asban. But Asban turned his head to taunt and tease that rock one time too many. Not looking where he was going, he tripped. Ka-thunk! He fell on the ground right in front of Big Rock. Since the rock had never been traveling before, it didn't know how to stop. Instead, it went kaboom, kaboom, splat! Kaboom, kaboom, kaboom! On and on the rock traveled, enjoying itself quite a lot. Oh dear. And there lay Asban the raccoon, rolled so flat and wide by the rock that he could not move his arms or legs, or even his head. All he could move were his lips. "Help me! Somebody please help me!" he said in a small, flattened-out voice. But no one seemed to hear Asban's cry for help. Or maybe, remembering all the tricks he had played, they did hear and pretended not to notice. Bear skipped by, but didn't stop to help. Fox skipped by, but didn't stop to help. Rabbit, kabunk, kabunk, hopped right over him, appeared not to even notice, didn't stop to help. One by one, just about every animal in the forest passed Asban by. Asban began to think he would be lying there forever. Then, toward the end of the day, one of the smallest creatures walked by. It was one of the ants. Walking right on top of Asban, the ant looked at his flattened-out face and asked, "How can I help you? Everyone says we ants are good for nothing." Asban had hoped for someone a little bigger than an ant, but he looked up and said, "Oh, I think you ants are wonderful. Please, go and get all your brothers and sisters and your cousins and get them to come back and pull me into shape. If you do, I promise I'll always be your friend." Well, it's not easy being an ant. Other creatures are always kicking you around, not even noticing you. With a friend as big as Asban, the ant thought, maybe everyone will show us a little more respect. "I will help," said the ant, "but remember your promise." "Yes, yes, of course," said Asban. "Now hurry up and come back here with the others." So, the ant went back to his village. "Hear me," he said. "Asban the Great has promised he will always be our friend if we help pull him back into shape." The ants agreed that it would be good to have a friend as big as Asban, and so, before long, all of the ants, thousands of them, gathered around the raccoon and began to do something they do very well: work together. Those ants pulled and pushed and pushed and pulled and began putting Asban back into shape. Soon Asban the raccoon could move. He stood up, and as he did so, he saw that many of the ants were still clinging to his body. Instead of being grateful for what they had done for him, he just brushed them off and said, "Horrible ants!" He began to walk away from them without even saying thank you. However, after only a few steps, he noticed something. His legs were very short. His body was still quite wide. He had brushed those ants off before they had finished stretching him out. But having broken his promise, he knew the ants would never agree to finish the job. Raccoon had to accept being the short, squatty animal that he is to this day. And he is certainly not a fast runner. And that is the story of Raccoon's last race. And as I told you, if you wanted to check this out, you'd find it in the children's department under 398.2, BRU for Bruchak, the author. Now, this is not a Cherokee song or an Abenaki song, but it's a song that tells the same thing about the animals and how we're all connected and we all have a special place. All of us, the humans, the animals, the birds, we all have a special place in this world. All God's critters have a place in the choir. Some sing low, some sing higher, some sing out loud on a telephone wire, and some just clap their hands, paws, or anything they got now. Well, you listen to the top with the little bird singing, the melodies, the high notes ringing, the screech owl hollers up above the trees, the jaybird disagrees. All God's critters have a place in the choir. Some sing low, some sing higher, some sing howls, the wild coyote howls. Oh, you try that with me. The wild coyote howls. Oh, good. All God's critters have a place in the choir. Some sing low, some sing higher, some sing out loud on a telephone wire, and some just clap their hands, paws, or anything they got now. Well, you listen to the bass, that's the part at the bottom where the bullfrog hoops, the hippopotamus moans and groans with a big to-do. The old cow just goes moo, moo. You do that part with me, okay? The old cow just goes moo, moo. Good. All God's critters have a place in the choir. Some sing low, some sing higher, some sing out loud on a telephone wire, and some just clap their hands, paws, or anything they got now. It's a simple song of life that you sing everywhere, with the ox and the fox, the grizzly bear, the knobby alligator and the hawk above, the shy raccoon and the turtle dove. You sing with me? All God's critters have a place in the choir. Some sing low, some sing higher, some sing out loud on a telephone wire, and some just clap their hands, paws, or anything they got now. Okay, thank you. Now the last thing I have for you today is a craft I thought you might enjoy making a shaker so that you could shake it and dance around. You could put on some lively sounding music or just sing it yourself and shake your shaker. Now what I did, of course, was I took a paper plate, just a plain nice thin one like this, and the first thing I did was fold it over, and then I took magic markers or crayons or whatever you have in the house, and on each side I made designs. Now on this side, you can make any designs you want, anything you want. It's your shaker. All right, this is a cloud with rain, and this is supposed to be snow. This is a tent, a buffalo, and the sun, and I made a trim around the edge. And on this one, this is a tree, of course, and this is a thunderbird, the sun and the rain. So after you get your coloring all finished, then what you're going to do is get tape, and tape, don't put the beans in yet. What's going to make the rattling noise are beans, dried beans. So don't put them in yet, or they'll just spill all over everywhere. So what you're going to do is tape the edges all around until about this far. Then you have a little opening, you see, where you can pour the beans in. Then you tape that part shut, and you have a shaker. All God's critters have a place in the choir. Some sing low, some sing higher, some sing out loud on a telephone wire, and some just clap their hands, paws, or anything you got now. Thank you for listening today. Next week we're going to have a program about Diwali, and it will be a very beautiful, interesting program. And I'll see you then. Goodbye. Let's see.